Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so that you can build it yourself. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Zach Golden, and we're going to talk about win-loss analysis. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Colin. Really excited to be here.
Me too, man. I'm curious. Win-loss analysis is not something that I think most salespeople have probably gone through unless you've worked in a fairly large sales organization. How did you, and I've noticed that you've been doing this for 10 years now. How did you get into win-loss analysis in the first place?
Yeah, funny you bring that up. Like this month is actually my 10-year anniversary. So I've been, for the past decade, just have had the privilege of helping companies of all shapes and sizes really try to learn how to win and retain more of their customers by using win-loss. And what I've found is that win-loss is just a super powerful tool. And why I've stuck with it for so long is that it really answers the most quintessential business questions, really the most fundamental things like, how do I grow my company? How do I win more? What do customers think about me? What is my competitor doing and how can I beat them out? And those questions are pretty relatively simple, but the answers to them are just extremely nuanced and, intrinsic. And I find, sleuthing through to find the answers and to coach the clients I'm working with on what the answers to those questions are fascinating. So it's been fun to kind of build my career around it.
That's really interesting. It's one of those things that I think less common in the sales world. I totally get the value. It sounds like it's a ton of work. So if I'm a listener, founder, sales leader, salesperson, why should I think about going through all of this work to go and try and hit up people that have already told me no and figure out why they said no?
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, it's all about raising your game and winning more business. There are like third-party studies, like Gartner has said that a win-loss program can help a sales team increase their revenue, sometimes up to 50%. But to your point, not a lot of companies do it. Do you have any guess like how many sales teams or companies out there actually do win-loss?
I'm thinking single digit percentages. I'm going to say my first reaction was 5%.
Yeah.
I think deviation of 4.
It's definitely in the low single digits. Like whenever we talk with companies who are interested in putting something in place and we ask, what are you doing currently? It is just very rare for someone to say, we've got, a partner who we work with who's doing interviews on our behalf, and we've got a really strong program in place. The tricky thing about win-loss is that you can define it a lot of different ways. Like some companies will just be looking at, if they're using a CRM, what their reason codes are, and maybe they're doing some data mining around what their loss reasons are by product or region, if they're getting that granular. But all that data is like so intrinsic, like it's just very flawed. What we think about in terms of win-loss is it's more of like a forensic exercise to kind of really get into the exact detail of what buyers think about your product offering and how you're going to market and ultimately how they're making their decisions. And the only way to do that is through really in-depth interviews. And yeah, not a lot of companies kind of commit to the process and the rigor of doing those debriefs.
What I would love to the general patterns behaviors is really interesting to me. So customer centric is kind of one on the index of like, we talk about ourselves to we talk about our customers. Mm-hmm. The other general pattern is the kind of expected value or the satisfaction with the EV versus the satisfaction with the price. What are some other patterns that you've seen, that you've noticed in these interviews?
It's called win-loss analysis for a reason. We want to be comparing feedback in wins to feedback and losses. And I can touch more on that too, because some companies only do loss feedback, which is really good. Like you're going to get the most feedback in terms of kind of constructive feedback for how to move forward better from losses, obviously, because there's a reason why you lost. But wins are super important too, for a number of different reasons. One of them is being able to compare and contrast, right? Like we want to be able to see what are the things you're doing well when you win versus where you're falling short in those losses. Where are those areas of inconsistency that, depending on who our client is, ironing out that inconsistency to make sure that your messaging, your sales approach, how your product is being perceived is uniform across different areas of your business. That's another one where we work a lot with our clients. So definitely that's another kind of framework that we'll pay attention to.
Cool. And then like some trends in like mistakes. Mm-hmm. What other kind of trends do you see on the thing? Like when you're Yeah, like what are the standard like 3 to 5 things where you're like, oh yeah, they're doing this again? Are there some other common ones?
Yeah, I mean, specific to sales, because I know that's probably where your audience is most interested. There's kind of the big three, if you will, of what we call a consultative approach. It's, did you really understand your prospect's needs? Were you able to be consultative, really align the capabilities of your solution to what those specific needs are? That's one. Two is differentiation. Are you able to effectively talk about how your solution is different and better than maybe other solutions, and something that we're seeing a lot more deals that are ending in stall or no decision. So it's not just how you're different from other solutions in the marketplace, but how are you different and better than just someone keeping the status quo going, maybe using whatever they're doing in terms of a homegrown solution. And then the third is, we touched on it a little bit earlier, it's value articulation, making sure that prospects recognize what you're going to bring to their company, whether that's quantitatively through like ROI, or maybe it's more of an emotional value. I think in terms of like the trends that we see that drive whether our clients are doing well or falling short from a sales perspective, it's, are they nailing the consultative approach? Are they differentiating well? Are they articulating their value well? Those are the big three, I think.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, that's it. Podcast over. Just focus on those 3 things
Yeah, we
and
just
you'll be
solved
fine.
sales right there.
That's amazing. All right, I want to get into it now because those are
Mhm.
definitely 3 things where I'm like, okay, I could see, and when I'm thinking about our process, I'm like, okay, I know we're very consultative. That was a hard word to say. Differentiation, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I feel probably okay. And then value
Mhm.
articulation, I've got a particular rep I'm working with, and I'm like, this is one of the areas where we've been focusing on how do you build the business case. I love the
Mhm.
language of expected value, maybe because I used to play poker, not professionally or even amateurly, but just like,
Yeah.
I played in casinos and I didn't lose money. All of my money
Hey,
immediately.
that's a win right there.
I didn't consistently do that, but
Okay.
I'm net up a little bit. But I love the idea of the expected value of the
Mhm.
offering, of like what we're offering and building the business case around that. And you could kind of bring in the idea of like a risk adjusted EV almost when you're talking to a
Mhm.
prospect. I really like that. So how do we get into like how do I get into doing this win-loss analysis? Obviously, you talk to the wins, you talk to the losses. It's easier to talk to the wins because now they're your customers. How do you
Yep.
go about talking to the losses? Or tell me the story of both. But I'm
Mhm.
more curious about the
Yeah, for
losses because
sure.
those people are ghosting you
Yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. Well, yeah, a lot of the time. I think thinking about putting a win-loss program in place, I think, the first step, which before we get into like the tactical things, is just kind of taking a step back and being like, am I ready for the feedback that I'm going to receive? Feedback it's absolutely a gift, but some people are afraid of it. So, as long as you're ready to kind of leave your ego at the door and receive not just praise, but like the constructive criticism about where you fell short, recognize that criticism is going to make you better, then you're ready. And I think that is step one. And whether you're doing win-loss like on yourself or maybe you're founder of a company, you have to kind of make sure that culturally your team is ready for the feedback. And it can be a really great tool for building a culture of accountability and continuous improvement, but there needs to be that buy-in up front. And then from there, before even doing the interviews, there's what we kind of think about as like a design phase. So think about things like really simply like who's going to be doing the interviews. And that varies depending on organization, right? If you're a founder and you're still kind of like doing all the sales yourself, some of the things you need to think about are, should I be doing these interviews myself, or should I be bringing in someone who's a little bit more objective in a third party? Same thing for like, if you have a small sales team, who should be doing those interviews? There are pluses and minuses to kind of like different approaches companies can take, but you want to know who's going to be doing them. You want to design interview guides in a way that is going to be a nice marriage of information that you're focused on. What are the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things that the questions you want most answered, but also leave room for what was important for the prospect themselves, right? Like getting back to being customer centric. If you just focus the whole thing on, well, what did I do and all this stuff, you might miss something like, the prospect was focused on something that you didn't even touch on. So you want to give some thought to interview guide design, and then you want to think about who you're actually going to be talking to. And in order to get them to commit, there are a couple of things that I would recommend there. I mean, the first is build it into your sales process. We like to say that win-loss is, or the last step of the sales process isn't just marking it as closed, whether that's won or lost. It's actually following up and doing a post-decision debrief. But in order to get there, as you're having conversations with prospects, pre-wire it. Say, hey, I'm really looking forward to coming in and presenting, tomorrow or next week. Just by the way, hey, win, lose, or draw, I'm committed to collecting your feedback. It's going to help me improve. And then, when decision actually comes, the prospect knows you're going to be reaching out for feedback, and they kind of feel like they're in a position, they feel a little bit indebted to you. Hopefully you built a strong enough relationship, invested a lot in the sales pitch so that they feel like your effort is worth their time to provide feedback. So those are all things you can kind of like set up yourself to have a successful research program. But let me stop there. I'm, happy to go deeper into any of those areas if you want.
Yeah, no, I think it's such a one. I'm a big fan of like automatic habits where you do it on every deal. I'm going to try this out. Okay, so we started with it's design, research, action. In the design phase, you're working on the interview guide. You basically map out the interview guide, which is the questions that you want answered and the people you're going to ask.
Yeah, exactly. Who you're going to talk to, what you're going to talk to them about, right? And I love the word interview guide because it is meant to be a guide. You don't want to have just a list of questions that you're going down one after the other.
Checklist.
Exactly.
That's awful.
It's going to be robotic. It's a quick way to get whoever's providing you the feedback to just shut down and recognize it feels like a race to just get to the end of the checklist. And so they're going to help you get there. They're just going to give you one sentence responses and keep moving. You want questions so that it's a focused conversation. And also, as you're receiving the feedback, sometimes it can be tough to hear. It can help you just center of where you want to go next. But you don't want that scripted feeling, right? Leave it open for discussion, leave room for probes, right? Like as you're having the conversation, don't just take the first thing that comes out of their mouth at face value. Invite them to open up and say more. Can you tell me more about that? Ask for competitive examples, things like that. And even just using silence, right? Like say, hey, I'm taking notes, keep talking. And people will fill that space because people hate silence. So as you're doing the interviews, kind of use those little tips to get people to really open up as much as possible.
No, I want to ask you about questions, but
yeah.
I don't want to spend 8 hours talking about questions because I'm sure there's a bit of a method to the madness. Is it fair to say that they're centered around the three kind of general patterns, behaviors that you found that we talked about above, the customer-centric product or the consultative approach, the differentiation and value articulation?
I actually think about guides like more of following the buyer journey, if you will. You want to understand what was bringing them to market, kind of how they set up their evaluation, how they learned about you, what business problems they were trying to solve. And hopefully that's information you uncovered during your discovery. But sometimes kind of like taking a step back and just getting the lay of the land really helps you understand your buyer more. You want to understand what they thought about you, some ended questions. Hey, what did you think we did well? Where could we have improved? And just kind of leave those top of mind, see what comes up from the respondent's perspective, but then also drill down, what did you think about our sales process? What did you think about our product? Different features, user interface, how we partnered with you from like a services perspective. How was our pricing compared to the competition? Kind of like center on some of those main areas of feedback. And then you want to get to, why did you make the decision you did? Who'd you choose? If it was a loss, why did you choose them? If it was a no decision, maybe like what changed? You came into this process looking to maybe implement a vendor, what shifted internally? And is there anything that you'd recommend me to do moving forward to like better partner with your organization? Things like that. You kind of want to just, when I'm creating interview guides for our clients, I try to follow the buyer journey and really get like that holistic perspective of their evaluation.
That's really great. So you kind of follow the buyer journey, what brought them to market, how they've heard about you, what they thought about you, your process, your product, your company in relation to the competitors. And then you want to get into their decision, what direction they went, what were the key factors in that decision, and like kind of understanding where the delta was between, you versus your competitor. I'm kind of thinking of like a radar graph of like, they were strong on this side and we were strong on this side. And this was the most important piece to us. And that kind of helps understand, like, is that this was their perception? Was it accurate? And so like, was it really a product loss where their product, the competitor's product was a better fit? Or was it a sales loss where the competitor's sales process was better?
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you think, the right way to think about it?
Yeah. Bingo. Yep.
Cool. I'm starting a win-loss analysis company next week.
There you go. I'm giving you all the key to the castle right here.
No, I mean, this is the best part of the podcast. Like, I get to learn how to do a thing, and I'm annoyingly curious anyway. And I'm going to ask this, even if we just met in a bar, I'd be asking these same questions. So now we just record it and people get to listen and kind of benefit from me annoying people with like, oh, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more.
Well, like I said, it's why I like win-loss so much, is that like, it's not rocket science. We're asking buyers about what they thought about a company and why they made the decision they did. But there's so much you can unpack from the responses that the buyers are giving you. And I just find it fascinating. But yeah, it's not like there's some, secret algorithm to doing it. You just have to do it well. You got to commit to it and, kind of bring there is some level of expertise and little tips you can do to do it better. But you really just kind of have to commit to it and just act on the feedback as it comes in.
So if I think about the design phase, it's kind of two different pieces. It's first picking, maybe three phases. It's trying to understand ahead of time, these are the questions that we want to answer. Then these are the folks that we're going to reach out to. And then this is what we're going to do when we get them on a call. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah.
Cool. And then from a win perspective, they're your customers. So it's much easier to start that conversation and you run the same questions through them. And then the loss takes a little bit more. Largely, the last piece is just on the execution side of this. When I think about the design phase, say it's my sales team. It's myself, I'm the founder, run the sales team. We got a couple of people on the team. Is it me reaching out to them? Is it them reaching out to them and booking the calls?
So those are the things to think about. I mean, you kind of have to weigh, like I mentioned, like who's doing the interview is really important, right? So a salesperson can reach out themselves and do the interview. And that's great, but they're just not in an objective position to receive the feedback. Obviously very biased, and the respondents kind of recognize that too. They're agreeing to do the interview because of the relationship you built, but because of that relationship, they don't want to tell you that you messed up the demo and that someone did it better.
Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend kind of getting one step removed. Maybe that is someone within your organization, like you're doing interviews on behalf of your team, something like that. Or maybe you can find like someone who can help from like a third party perspective that isn't associated, a member of your company, your team, that can really bring that.
Maybe someone
unbiased
win-loss experience
that
10
would
years.
Be helpful too.
So getting into the research step, now we're on the live conversation. We've gone through all the effort to design the thing. We've got this person on the call. Obviously, we just run through the book, active listening, all the good sales stuff, market research stuff. How does the research phase go? Is it just the calls? Is it the analysis?
Yeah. So
talk to me about this phase.
You do the interview, and what we do is we transcribe the interview because we're delivering it back to our clients. I would definitely recommend, like, if you're doing it yourself, maybe you record the interview, but at the minimum, like, you're taking a lot of notes.
Is that by hand? Or do you use like a Fathom or some kind of tool?
I mean, those tools are getting pretty good now. So like you can definitely use that. Some people use, like, I'm old fashioned. I've got my pen and notebook in front of me right now.
No way, you psychopath.
I'm like the last bastion of like millennials who's still kind of like some things old fashioned. But yeah, I think that, the call recording stuff, the transcription, that's getting really impressive now. So you can rely on that for the most part. A lot of our interviewers will use that. And yeah, you want to kind of like sit down and go through what the notes are. So on an individual basis, like for instance, if you did an interview on a member of your team, what I would recommend is, hey, send that recording, send that transcription to the member of your team, give them a chance to review, and then sit down and talk it through, like use it for coaching. And just like you're being very careful of positioning the interview with the prospect as, I'm not here to debate you, or I'm just here to collect your feedback. When you're sitting down for the coaching opportunity, I'm not here to rub your nose in some of this critical feedback. I don't want to say, hey, the prospect said you messed up the demo. Like, what happened? You want to say, hey, like, how did you think the demo went? How's that compared to what the prospect said? What are some things you can do moving forward to be a little bit better? Like, use it as a productive coaching tool. That's really important on an individual basis. And sometimes there's going to be, there is going to be a lot of good sales feedback, but if there's feedback about your product, bring in, your head of product, talk about, hey, we're receiving this feedback. Why do you think this is going on? Is there something we can do about this? Get those different perspectives, because just like, that meme of the dress, is it yellow, is it blue? Like, there are always two sides or multiple sides to every story. What you want to do is combine what the prospect said and what your seller said, and see where there's common ground, see where there are differences, and unpack why those differences exist. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's, hey, they're seeing things differently than how we want them to see them. How can we get everyone seeing the same thing? That's on, again, the individual basis. But then definitely as you're doing more interviews, you're going to get to a point where you want to look across those interviews, and you want to, it's not, like I was saying earlier, it's not rocket science. It's, hey, like, what percentage of our clients are saying they're making their decision based on product feature X, or what percentage of our, lost interviews are they saying our sales presentation didn't meet their needs. Kind of looking at these percentages, looking at if you're capturing scores, like what your average score is compared to the competition. There's some pretty simple but extremely illuminating analysis you can do. And then, as you're doing more, you start to understand the patterns and the trends, and can look through those different frameworks that I was talking about earlier to better understand overall storylines that are coming through.
Really interesting. I want to double click on like tracking the metrics and analyzing. I've done customer development interviews and I just put them all into a big sheet line by line. And it's like, I have to have an ultra wide monitor to see it all. And I still can't get it all because there's so many variables. Is that roughly what you all are doing with this? Kind of the same thing. You just put the feedback into a big spreadsheet and then analyze it from there.
I mentioned been doing this for 10 years. Like when I started my role as an analyst, at that point we were manually data entering all the interviews into a spreadsheet, and then, going through line by line, hey, this person mentioned this person mentioned that, kind of tagging them. We still do that to a large degree, but, we're also leveraging technology tools that help us tag things in real time and then get to aggregate percentages a lot quicker. So spreadsheets are super powerful for doing that. And you want to just get a sense of how many people of all the people that we talk to are talking about the areas that you're interested in.
Interesting. All right. So we've got the live conversations. We run them, we analyze them, put them in a big database. It sounds like you've got some sort of automated, you take the call recording, you take the transcript, you ask it, hey, GPT, tell me if they did this, tell me if they did that, tell me if they did that. You kind of rerun on. This is how I'm thinking I would do it in a prompt. It's just, I actually have a prompt that will go, and we have like a call scoring framework. Nice. And it does like a lightweight version of this. And you just give it past the call transcript into GPT and say, hey, did you open well? Do you think the rapport was built well? Did you end with next steps? Like, the basic kind of things. So it sounds like that's the kind of the high level, you put it all into a spreadsheet, and then you've got an analyst that can go through and go over the trends and the patterns.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably like the biggest shift that we're seeing right now with doing this, whether it's like AI or technology helping with the call recording, the call transcription, the call like tagging and analysis. All that stuff is just, even like compared to like using ChatGPT a couple of months ago to where it is now, like it's getting so much more advanced. And it really helps like with all of those kind of like administrative or analytical type things. But where I think there's still like where AI or technology isn't going to be able to replace is like that human to human interaction, right? Like reflecting back on feedback is a gift. It's also like fundamentally human. I think having face-to-face conversations with someone about, hey, what'd you think about our product or service or not? And why'd you buy? People are going to open up a lot more to a person than they would, just kind of like a web survey or an AI driven thing. And same thing with the analysis, right? Like say you're kind of looking through all the interviews on your team, and you mentioned, or you noticed that there's a certain attribute, a sales skill that comes up a lot as a weakness, or maybe a specific person on your team is struggling with a certain element. I think the best way to get them to act on that is through, sit down, a coaching session where you're face to face. Don't just kind of send them into a dashboard to interpret the results for themselves.
I think the biggest advantage that humans have over an AI, because I think technically you could, if you could get your prospects to go through these things, I think technically you could probably build a GPT bot that would go through and answer and ask all these questions and do it fairly efficiently from your time perspective. I think the thing that it can't replicate is the shared experiences and the empathy.
Exactly.
I imagine we'll get to the empathy side with a GPT bot or AI bots eventually. I don't know how believable or how real it will be without those shared experiences, right? Like that's where you can really resonate with somebody. Like, the minute facial expressions, the, telling a story of like, oh yeah, I've been there too. And, Bob did this. Like, I
Right.
don't know if we'll ever get there. It'd be hard to get there from an AI because the AI doesn't have
Exactly. Yeah.
experiences, I think. Sorry,
Yeah. No,
future
it's
AI, if you're listening to this and being like, fuck you, man.
no, I totally agree. I mean, it's I think I was just going to get there, but yeah, the tone of voice, the pause before you say something where someone can tell that
Mhm.
you're really kind of wrestling with how you're saying it or being diplomatic with what you're saying. Yeah, I think you want to use the AI and the technology to almost like prop up to make your human to human interactions as effective as possible. And then you can focus on like things like the empathetic listening or like the active listening or storytelling that you're doing as you're trying to coach your team on what you're seeing in the data. That's where you can focus.
Love it. That is a great segue to like, how do we act on some of this? Because it's one
Mhm.
thing to design the study, or to design the research. It's another thing to do the research. But if you're not going to put it into practice, it's probably not worth doing. So, what are some best practices for putting this into practice?
I think the biggest thing to do, whether you're just going through maybe you're sitting down and watching the call recording or listening to it, or you're sharing your written notes, you want to share it, right? Like you don't just want to look at things through your own point of view. Bring in, like I mentioned, like someone from product, someone from marketing, certainly the salesperson who was involved in the deal, and maybe sales leader. Get kind of multiple people involved in reading and interpreting the feedback, and everyone's going to bring their own different perspective on what was going on. And the best way to get to kind of like the ultimate truth or the way to move forward productively is by combining all those different perspectives. So that can be kind of like a meeting where you sit down and go through just qualitative, watching the recording, like I said, or maybe it is a roll up of the results and you're sitting down and going through the trends like, hey, you know, 10% of our customers are mentioning this or 90% are mentioning that, and talking about what the implication is. I think the biggest thing is share the results, get people involved from within your organization. And that's where we get into like some of the intangible benefits of win-loss is it really drives like we call it cross-functional alignment across your business, because it's you're bringing everyone together, they're discussing what the feedback is, and you kind of eventually get to a point where people are seeing it and understand it the same way. And that's really powerful for organizations, is to get people, to use a overused phrase like singing from the same hymnal. That's something that I think a lot of business leaders struggle with, is how do we get people aligned around where we're trying to get to? And one of the best ways to do that is by saying, hey, here's where the market thinks we are. Let's make sure we're all aligned on where we're trying to get to and how to get there.
And so I'd love to wrap it. Just, do you know anybody that does win-loss analysis?
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if people are listening to this and they like what they're hearing, they want to learn more. I have a lot of experience and expertise doing this kind of work. We're the market leader for win loss, and it's win loss on new business decisions, but it's also a voice of the customer feedback as a whole, right? Like a lot of companies have, product led growth models where it's that land and expand, where you want to be talking to existing clients about, hey, what's going on? How are you using our products? What could we get? How could we get you to, use our product more, or maybe why you're spending less? If churn is happening, we do churn a lot. So, and I would love to, continue the conversation.
Love it. I'll fire a link to your LinkedIn so people are looking to reach out.
Awesome.
We've got a couple of quick links for you there. Zach, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for helping me start my win-loss analysis company next week. If anybody's interested. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
I am genuinely thinking like I'm going to do this on our sales team. That's definitely something that everybody should be thinking about, especially, with where buyers are at. So thank you for
exactly.
sharing all your secrets.
Yeah, happy to. And yeah, you should. Would love to maybe come back another time and just after you've done some interviews, talk about what you learned.
Totally. I would love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll see you all next week.